Look, I've been waiting for over 10 minutes for you to get that patient placed in a room and ready for an exam. What have you been doing?
Well, there were no rooms. I had to wait.
Do you do anything around here other than make excuses?
Dr. Pinter, the patient, she'll hear you.
Well, maybe she should hear me. I mean, she should know that somebody around here cares that she's been waiting. I mean, what, you think she views you as a model for efficiency?
But you'll upset her.
Well, I imagine she's already upset. I mean, to depend on somebody like you? I mean, how does a person like you even get through nursing school? I mean, where'd you go? They clearly, wherever you went, they did not teach you about how to work in the real world. I mean, if you can't get a patient set up in a room in a timely fashion, I can't imagine you giving you any kind of great responsibility.
Dr. Pinter, is there a problem here?
Nothing that a little competence can't fix.
Dr. Pinter, your patient is going to want to be looked at.
Yeah.
Sally, can I have a word with you?
Sure.
Don't pay any attention to him. He's developing quite a reputation around here, and he's just being his usual charming self. Ignore him. Come on, let's see you just hang tough.
Disruptive behavior has been defined as any pattern of behavior that causes conflict, chaos, disharmony, dysfunction, and or anxiety in the medical environment. It is best characterized by a power imbalance between different parties, a physician and a nurse, for example, or a senior versus a junior member of the team. The imbalance of power is then exploited and abused. Disruptive behavior can affect the workplace to such a degree that others are unable to fulfill their duties or care effectively for patients. It can also increase staff absenteeism and turnover markedly. Some groups may be unable to hire other members of the healthcare team. Disruptive behavior must be addressed quickly and directly. Tolerating and excusing the behavior risks encouraging further similar behavior. With this in mind, let us see how Sally's situation might have been handled more appropriately.
Look, I've been waiting for over 10 minutes for you to get this patient set up in a room and ready for an exam. What have you been doing?
I'm sorry, no rooms were available. I had to wait.
Do anything around here other than make excuses?
Dr. Pinter, the patient, she'll hear you.
Well, maybe she should hear me. I mean, she should know that somebody around here cares that she's been waiting. I mean, what, you think she views you as a model for efficiency?
But you'll upset her.
Well, I imagine she's already upset. I mean, to depend on somebody like you? I mean, how does a person like you even get through nursing school? Where did you go anyway? I mean, wherever you went, they clearly did not teach you about how to work in the real world. I mean, if you can't get a patient set up in a room in a timely fashion, I can't imagine giving you any kind of greater responsibilities.
Dr. Pinter, is there a problem here?
Nothing that a little competence can't take care of.
Will you excuse us for a minute, Sally?
Sure.
Dr. Pinter, could you close the door, please? Dr. Pinter, regardless of what you may think of Nurse Prin's ability, your behavior is unacceptable. If you have some concerns regarding how we are functioning here, you need to speak directly to me.
But she was not operating under proper
I will
procedure.
speak to our program director, and I will request that you are given information on how to communicate effectively any concerns that you may have.
But you're still not hearing what I'm saying.
The next step is between you and the program director. I feel, however, that you do owe Miss Prin an apology. Also, if you will find it useful, the three of us can get together and discuss how we can communicate more effectively in the clinic as a team. Thank you, Dr. Pinter.
Thank you.
In the past, a physician's disruptive behavior was often tolerated. Faculty role models themselves may have behaved in a disruptive manner, making it even more difficult to manage. However, disruptive behavior has become increasingly unacceptable because of its adverse impact on patient care, on the institution, and on employee morale. Patient care is at risk when a nurse's fear of a physician reduces their willingness to communicate vital information. It is also at risk when nurses must shift their focus from caring for patients to managing physicians. Disruptive behavior can lead to charges of a hostile work environment, harassment, and racism, all of which can have severe legal and financial consequences for the institution. Co-workers and patients may make direct reports to the state medical board that can result in licensing restrictions or revocation. This segment of the LIFE program has been designed to help you recognize and discourage disruptive behavior when it occurs and to prepare you to intervene so that the behavior can be dealt with constructively and effectively.
Disruptive behavior is a symptom of an underlying condition, much like congestive heart failure is a symptom of cardiovascular disease. Disruptive behavior can signal sleep deprivation, too heavy a workload, stress in the workplace or in personal life, poor impulse control, low self-esteem, concrete thinking, or intolerance. When it is elicited by factors such as these, the behavior can often be extinguished with a quick, firm, and authoritative response. Identify the offending behavior, describe it as unacceptable, outline the consequences of its recurrence, and document the incident. If the individual recognizes that the behavior is inappropriate, understands its negative impact on the healthcare team, apologizes, and moves on, no further disciplinary action may be required. However, if the egregious behavior recurs and becomes an identifiable pattern, then it usually indicates that the physician is affected by a much more serious condition and will require a comprehensive evaluation. Narcissism is probably the most common etiology of disruptive behavior. Other etiologies include borderline personality disorders or traits, obsessive-compulsive disorders or traits, bipolar disorder, substance abuse, and depression. Disruptive behavior includes inappropriate expression of anger or resentment, inappropriate words or actions directed toward another person, and inappropriate response to patient needs or staff requests. It can also take the form of pejorative body language and tone of voice.
When I was an intern, I was yelled at once by a doc who didn't like the way I changed a patient's dressing. I've even had them insult me over a treatment plan. Nurses like Miss Prynne aren't the only targets for physicians' bad behavior. PAs, techs, administrators, and even more junior physicians are all potential targets. And patients are even potential targets. Fortunately, though, the culture is changing. It's much less tolerant of unprofessional behavior.
I hate it when I get yelled at. Sometimes I just feel like quitting. My friend Ellen, she got yelled at by some doctor who said her chart was incomplete. She not only screamed at her in front of 2 technicians and a PA, but she kept jabbing her finger in Ellen's face. Can you believe that?
In my experience, program directors and faculty usually tolerate disruptive behavior far too long, most with the mistaken hope that the behavior will resolve spontaneously. In today's healthcare environment, ignoring or tolerating it is not a viable option. Institutions need to develop a clearly stated code of conduct as well as policies and procedures for dealing with violations of institutional standards. While no code can be exhaustive and catalog every possible situation, it should, as clearly as possible, describe unacceptable behavior and outline the consequences if professional standards are violated. The ACGME competencies help a great deal. They emphasize interpersonal communication skills, professionalism, and teamwork.
It is essential that lines of communication with faculty, nurses, and all members of the healthcare team be kept open. These people can frequently provide the most accurate feedback on the professionalism and communication skills of trainees. Any complaints of temper tantrums, such as angry outbursts or instrument throwing, of personal and/or sexual innuendo, sarcasm, profanity, or denigration should be investigated carefully and documented meticulously. Dr. Volpone exhibited the right behavior when she directly addressed the disruptive behavior with Dr. Pinter privately and firmly. Her next step needs to be a discussion with her program director to describe objectively what she observed. It is then the program director's responsibility to take the next step.
Once a pattern of disruptive behavior has been identified and a confidential investigation has confirmed the veracity of the complaint, the next step is to speak formally to the resident. The program director is best positioned to take control of this intervention, which should then be followed by referral for evaluation. Treatment, if needed, can then be recommended and carried out either by a resource such as the hospital's employee health program or a physician's health program. A state physician's health program has the advantage of working exclusively with clinicians. Peers are better positioned than a non-medical person to challenge any instances of denial on part of the resident.
When the program director meets with the resident, problem behaviors should be described carefully and their effect on others clearly explained. Focus on the behavior in question, not the why of its occurrence. The unacceptable nature of the behavior should be emphasized and the seriousness of the incident stressed. Develop and draw up a plan consisting of a learning contract, corrective action, probation, or whatever is consistent with your own policy. It should clearly describe what behaviors will not be tolerated and the consequences if they recur. Consequences may include dismissal from the training program. This written document helps to clearly communicate the various issues to the resident relating to professional conduct. It also helps if efforts to assist in modifying the resident's behavior fail and disciplinary measures become unavoidable. Having a document in place provides evidence for any subsequent disciplinary action taken as a result of the resident's unprofessional behavior. Program directors need to also be aware that residents who have anger management problems at work may have similar behaviors at home. They should ask the resident directly about whether the resident displays abusive behavior toward their spouse, partner, or children. Residents are highly unlikely to admit to such behavior, but at least the program director has planted a seed of awareness. The Americans with Disabilities Act, discussed in another segment of the LIFE program, protects individuals with personality and bipolar disorders. However, these individuals must still be able to perform according to a program's established standards of conduct. A diagnosis of either of these conditions does not require that unprofessional behavior be accepted.
I heard that Dr. Pinter's program director had a serious talk with him. The policy around here is zero tolerance for that type of behavior. He's going to get the counseling he really needs.
The intervention with the resident should be planned carefully. Define the acceptable outcomes of the meeting ahead of time. Decide if an independent evaluation will be required. Ideally, the physician will take responsibility for the behavior and acknowledge the need for its modification. Offer help in obtaining treatment for the problem. If the physician can expect financial or emotional support during the rehabilitation period, identify and define it.
If, however, the resident refuses to acknowledge the disruptive behavior or follow any recommendations provided, emphasize that dismissal is a very real consequence.
If the resident accepts the need for treatment, it is helpful to assign a mentor who can guide and assist in recovery. Some treatment may consist of intensive inpatient intervention. The impact of treatment should be carefully monitored. Plans for reentry to the residency should be made well in advance of the resident's return to the work environment and should probably be developed in consultation with the mentor. Modifications to the rotation may be necessary. A contract outlining expectations of behavior is often very helpful. Residents may require ongoing counseling and monitoring. Their schedule should be adapted to those needs accordingly.
Unfortunately, many physicians with disruptive behavior have personality disorders. These are not easily treated, the success rate being less than it is for physicians with chemical dependence. Nonetheless, it is important to at least attempt rehabilitation and have a clear, fair, and well-documented process for termination from the program for those cases where rehabilitation fails. Program directors and institutions will need to be realistic in their expectations. If the medical environment is to function optimally, collegiality and mutual respect must be fostered and cherished.